working for the career development office at Bard College, where I'm a career advisor. I primarily specialize with first years, but I also work with all other classes and also support some alum. I also run a commercial drone services company called Hovering Heights. I'm a certified Part 107 Small Unmanned Air Systems Federal Aviation Administration pilot. It's a long, really long title. And basically, it licenses me to fly small unmanned aircrafts under the weight of 55 pounds.
What would you say about your past at Bard has impacted what you are doing now?
So the career advising position that I hold it's in a part-time capacity here at Bard. And this role was actually held by a career advisor that supported me when I was a first year at Bard, or not a first year, a senior at Bard. That is the same person who sort of like told me like, hey, I know that this position's opened up. I'm not sure where you're at right now with your career and what you want to do, but I do recommend you consider it. And so I had not considered being a career advisor at all at that point. But because of the fact that I had a rapport with this career advisor, I didn't have this rapport with them for the sake of them, knowing that they were going to retire at some point and knowing that they wanted somebody, that they knew to try and like apply for the position. But I had a relationship with this person in a similar way that like having a relationship with the executive director of Brothers at Bard. I actually went to school with the ED of Brothers at, and that sort of started through like a friendship running the commercial drone business. If it wasn't for community in terms of like being able to ask questions and being engaged, I don't know what having a business in the Hudson Valley or having, gigs consistently, what that would look like without the idea of like relationships that I've built here at Bard.
Many students not sure how to approach networking or talking to people about different opportunities confidently, not to look self-serving in a way.
I do know what you mean. And also like I was there at one point where I was just like, why do I want to have a conversation with this person? Like I don't want to come in with like feeling like I need something. We all have like things that we need to survive, whether it's, needing to have money with a job post grad and needing to pay your rent, pay your bills. Like all these things are very true. Like centering the fact that you just want to learn about somebody or you just want to be curious about somebody. My first job in Brothers at, having friendship, being dedicated to a space. I should also like put that in there because Brothers at, I had no idea that would turn into a job post grad. That was not something I had in mind. I never got paid to do it. So like every week, like, dedicating like an hour or two, or sometimes a lot more than an hour or two, depending on like what events we had going on. I'd show up. I didn't know it would ever turn into a job, but I also like did that work with friends and we were engaged in the Kingston community, like in the city of Kingston. I got to build a lot of relationships with the people in the city of Kingston, right? Like that wouldn't have happened. And that wasn't because I was looking for a job. I actually, I didn't think about my resume in that way. I didn't really start thinking about my resume, I'll be honest with you, until like I was applying for different jobs or different positions, or like especially post grad, right? I'm like, oh crap, I needed a job. Like after senior project is done, like I have to find a way to survive. Like there's no more meal swaps at Kline, right? Like everything changes. So I think that something that really helped was just like finding spaces that I enjoyed being at, but also like giving my time. And like I think that's a huge part of the liberal arts experience, but also the college experience. It's like, how do you not just dedicate time to academia, which is extremely important, right? Like you want to be focused in the discipline that you're in. You want to be well versed in what you're doing. You want to feel like you're learning and growing in what you're doing, but also like, how do you learn and grow as a person? Like, and what spaces do you have to like put yourself in to really engage and learn not just more about yourself, but the people around you.
You mentioned that you didn't start working on your resume until you started applying for jobs.
So the first time I probably worked on my resume was like probably trying to get a job in many places here on campus. It might have been sophomore year. Boy, did I mean, like sitting here as a career advisor and thinking about what I thought I knew about the resume then, I thought it was like super simple, right? And I thankfully I was able to like talk to my mom a little bit about it, because obviously she had put resumes together at some points. However, what I didn't really realize and I didn't know, and it's probably because a lot of my friends at the time weren't necessarily talking about the career development office. I do think, like in hindsight, I would have been grateful to go here earlier on. However, I didn't make it here by my senior year. So the resume was a process where like I thought it was just like trying to list out the things you were doing and trying to talk about them in like a really nice way, which, you know, as a part of the resume, but like it gets a lot deeper in terms of like how you demonstrate what you've learned and the skills and the assets that you bring. It just takes a lot of thought and a lot of critical thinking that I don't think I was thinking about. I was just like, all right, how do I get this piece of paper to get me a job? That was literally, it was really transactional how I thought about the resume, to be honest.
You weren't really thinking about starting your own business, or did you already have some thoughts in your mind?
No, I never thought about starting my own business. I never thought I'd be a person with a business. So let's also just start there. Like when I was in college, I always just saw it as like, you know, kudos to anyone who does it. That's like, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of work, a lot of things behind the scene. I always imagined it did, but it wasn't until like I thought I had a reason to start a business that I started a business. Even though it's like a drone services company, all the income from the DJing and the gig work that I do there, it falls in underneath that company. For me, I had to think about my family and like the capacity of like, can they take me on? No, they can't take me on. I have to like figure out a way to like live and survive. My dad, he grew up as an immigrant in a different country, in Jamaica. He wanted to be a pilot when he was younger. That was like a huge dream of his. And he wasn't able to accomplish that dream because he had so many other priorities, me being one of them, here in the States. So about, I want to say 4 or 5, I got him a drone and I got myself a drone. So it starts with like just being interested in something. I started to like fall into a rabbit hole where I did a lot of research. I was just watching constantly like a lot of like videos on different pilots and what they're doing and how they've like sort of gotten to where they're at, reading just a bunch of like news articles. So like newsletters, the policies that the US had around drones, kind of like remotely liked the idea of it when I was a teenager, but I think the prices weren't really nowhere near as accessible as they are now. And you know, they're still a little bit inaccessible. I realized like, oh wow, this could be like a suitable form of income. So I studied up for what's called a Part 107 exam, and I took it with the FAA at one of the official testing sites. And once I was able to pass, I was able to like sort of go from there and start a business. I realized it was a way to make a decent amount of income without having to like sacrifice what I'd like to say, like your physical and mental capacity in a way that can be a little bit difficult for someone who's a little bit older, right? And I'm not that person who I'm talking about a little bit older. I'm thinking like more like my dad, who's on his way into his 60s soon. And you know, like as he gets older, I don't want him to have to work jobs that are like not as meaningful to him, but also like can do damage to the body. So my goal is to hire him eventually to do this work, and then hire other young folks who, you know, they might be Black and brown, they might not know about this work, and I'm sort of introduce them to this work. Which has a lot of different applications. I should just start there.
There is a lot of conversation that I hear from students going on that, oh, you know, if I want to start a business, then I need to like study the financial part of it. I need to study accounting. I need to know the numbers well. You know, some students, for them, it may not even cross their minds. Start something small like you did, even if they just self-study through the internet. So what was your approach for learning about drones from plane zero to where you are now? Did you spend any money for it?
Yes. Oh, great question. Great question. So the test, I actually failed the first time. I should like say, womp womp womp. But it's true. Like sometimes you fail. I think I was a little too confident in myself the first time I took it. And like I just watched like a bunch of like videos online, specifically on YouTube University, right? Like they have plenty of Part 107 videos, and I'd say like plenty of them that are pretty solid, like with like a good amount of information. I didn't want to purchase any textbooks. I was like, you know, especially in having a small business and thinking about, you know, I wasn't doing any like big accounting, right? It's still a small business. But I wanted to keep my costs low. Don't pay for anything if you don't have to. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll just use online. And what I didn't do is I didn't give myself adequate enough time. And I think I like must have failed by like 2 questions, which like really burned because like you have to pay for each exam. So the second time I took it, I was like, I felt like, all right, this free route ended up costing me some money because I had to pay for the first time I took it, and I'm gonna have to pay again to take it again. So I like paid for a resource, about $300. My hindsight in paying for this specific resource is that I didn't like look for options. I was kind of at a point where I was like, damn, I failed the first time. So now I need to just grab something. And I didn't look into it as much as I would have loved to. For me, the resources I paid for, I paid $300 for it because it was on sale. Like, and they, you know, I made myself believe, oh, okay, I got to get it before it's not on sale. Problem with that resource was I thought it was so boring. It was like about like 8-9 hours worth of material. And like these guys are just like the most disengaging folks that I've ever seen in like a web series. So I moved on from that to actually a free resource. LinkedIn Learning. LinkedIn Learning is something you do have to pay for on LinkedIn. However, if you have a New York Public Library card, and in order to have a New York Public Library card, all you have to do is have an address in New York City or New York, period, New York State, or work in New York State or go to school in New York State. So once I had New York Public Library, I was able to access LinkedIn Learning for free. They had some really good courses there. I sat with those courses. I also like went online, and FAA does have like, they have some manuals that you can study from, but I just think like the way that they make things or like the way that they made that manual was just kind of like they threw it together because it's a little bit archaic, and I think it's not as accessible. That was just my thing, and the way that I needed to learn, or the way that I wanted to learn at the time, was a little bit less reading because I had been reading so many small business books. So I was watching a bunch of videos and sitting with the LinkedIn Learning videos, and those were really helpful. Pairing that, not just that by itself, but all those YouTube videos I had watched, I sat with those videos more. And then I also did some practice tests, which if I had just done this in hindsight, I would have saved myself, I think, about $200 or something like that. First time I took the exam. Second time I took it, I passed it with flying colors. Maybe like some people think about, like, I need to know accounting before like I start a business or like whatever. I have not learned nearly everything that I need to know about a small business. And I'm not saying that having not like sat with a lot of information. I've sat with a lot of information, and not just sitting with information, but asking questions, not just like online in different forms, but to people. Like I have so many people that I could probably regard as like mentors, like people who like I've sat in different conversations with, had lunch with them, cooked dinner for them, like, because out of gratitude and because of the fact that we have an ongoing like relationship. But if you were like me, I was like hustling in class to like just make sure like I knew what I needed to know. And then also like there's stuff that I wanted to know in class, or like things I wanted to dive into more with professors that like I'd go to office hours for, right? Or like I'd just engage in conversation with my peers about. But that same hustle that you learn with like, how am I going to get through 300 pages this week? That same hustle is what is then applied to like, oh shoot, taxes is due in 2 days. Like I need to figure out not just how I've done my taxes previously, which service provider I want to use, but I also need to figure out what are tax breaks, right? Like I need to like find this information. I need to scour the internet and figure out all the questions that I want to ask, first of all, because sometimes you need to know what you want to ask, right? As you get the answers to those questions, like vetting them with your mentors, and also like asking them like, how do they approach things? There's this thing called a PAB, a personal advisory board, similar to how like different institutions have like a board of advisors. So you can think about a personal advisory board as like a board to help support you make decisions. Like who are those people in your life that sit on your imaginary, and it doesn't have to be imaginary, but your real life personal advisory board? Like who are those people that you go to when you want to like really solve a conundrum, right? Or like you have a question and they have expertise in this field, whether it's like the expertise of having started a small business, or the expertise of having, you know, for me, being in aviation, like what's that space been like for you, right? Or the expertise of like how to be a son to your parents, right? Like as you're like navigating this relationship of getting older, like what were some of the things that you were doing with your family? Like how did you stay in touch with them post grad? How did you figure out different ways to pay rent? What are some hacks in terms of like how you look for housing, right? Just like little things. But who are these people that you can go to? I hope it doesn't come across as corny, but like, you know, like seeing someone and seeing that like they exist, they have people that they go home to, right? Or a pet, right? They have other things outside of this academic life or this work life, right? Like you know, I wasn't just going to them asking them like, hey, what do you think about if I were to do this with my business, right? I was also like reaching out and just saying like, how are you doing? Like, you know, how has this semester been treating you, right? You know, the weather's been a little bit rough lately. Have you been like managing everything well? Do you need any support? You're going through this thing, you know, like I like touch base with these people. I think that being able to do that here at Bart's, like the relationships I was able to build with my professors, but also my peers, right? Like I have friends who were my age, not just like folks who were a little bit more my senior. Building those relationships, I think, were super important, and seeing them as human, which is kind of like how I've always approached life. But like it has done me so much of like a benefit in terms of like the things that I've learned and how I've grown as a person and how I've been challenged.
And when was the moment that you were like, okay, now I want to come back here again?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. I had no idea. Once again, like I didn't know. So the first job I had out of Bard was Brothers At, but like I had no idea that I was coming back to Bard. When I was going through my senior year, I was like, all right, I'll see y'all later. It's gonna be like the end of the chapter. Like I was really sure that I was like, I don't know. Like I didn't know if I wanted to go back to the city. So I'm from Brooklyn. And yeah, the city just seemed like a lot, you know, after like having been here for like peaceful years. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So I kind of just gravitated towards things that like seemed cool. So I think before I got the job at Brothers At, I applied to 2 jobs, only 2, because they were the only ones that were interested in me and they were local. Um, but I didn't get those jobs. They ended up going to some really cool friends who also applied for these jobs that were local. I didn't have a problem with that, but it did leave me in a place of like, I don't know where I want to go. And, you know, things that I was interested in, like I didn't hear back from, right? So I was in a place where like I was just kind of like going around and like talking to different people who like I regard as mentors and asking like at a certain point, because I think like before I graduated, I want to say like maybe 2, 3 weeks before I graduated, I realized, you know, staying at Bard doesn't sound like a bad idea. Like but like what jobs can I apply to? Are there jobs that Bard is offering? I think I had a car at the time. I had like a little hoopty that I had purchased. And so like I was able to stay locally for another like 2, 3 months. And I worked I think 3 or 4 sessions at Ramapo. And by the time I finished working at Ramapo, they actually loved the work that I was doing to the point where like they actually offered me a job. Which, you know, I didn't apply for anything. So that was kind of cool. I was like excited. And I was now leveraging like being in a place where like, all right, someone has given me a job offer, but I still wanted to be patient to hear back from my you know, people I have relationships with. So once I heard back from people who I have relationships with, and they told me like the grant came through, we're good to go, I was ready to move on to that opportunity. But what I didn't do was I didn't close the door on Ramapo. Instead of like, I did say no, but I didn't just say no. I said no, and I would love to stay in relationship with y'all. And who would know that about like 9 months later, the world would shut down, right? In the capacity of like COVID-19 in March, the same job offer I got ended up turning into something where the organization I worked for Others At, we ended up partnering heavily with Ramapo for Children. Funding was huge. For me, I did leverage debt. So like I'm leveraging still a good amount of debt as I'm working through, but like I've created different plans, I'm applying to different grants and talking with my mentors or the personal advisory board. What do I see people doing? What is like typically the standard? Do I want to go this route, right? Like I didn't just like say, all right, let me just do this thing because everyone else was doing it. People don't have to start businesses and take on debt. I decided to start my business, and I flushed all my liquidity. So all the money I had, like I used my money first, but I also like had to figure out a way to make sure that I was able to write that off later, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, like I started like checking out different banks and the rates that they offer. Something to consider is your credit. Oh my gosh, this is so important. If you are listening right now, just start a credit card. If you need help with that, I can't really like give you financial advice, but I am in the office, and I can give you cards I recommend. I'm sure you can watch YouTube videos and try to make your own educated decision. Just start one credit card. And what I say about a credit card is like you don't have to use it. Like use it for like maybe a subscription that you know you pay off every month and have it on auto pay. I'm talking about like something for $5. Like do not use it for anything else. Like if you feel like, all right, I don't think I'm gonna be totally responsible, guess what? The credit card company is excited to have you on their team if you don't feel like you're gonna be responsible and you don't think that, you know, you can use it for more than, you know, a subscription, then they're gonna be excited to give you all different kinds of interest rate, et cetera, et cetera. But like build up that credit. I'm just gonna start there. If you can build up credit, because that is something that did come back for me when thinking about starting a business and finding myself good rates, and also banks being able to say like, all right, you got some solid credit, we're willing to lend you X amount of money. And then like prior to that, like I had to go in knowing like what money do I want to spend. But I stopped doing real estate because for me, and I know how I work, it was too transactional. Real estate agent needs you here at this time on this day, do it, send it, that's it. Like there wasn't any real relationship building. So for me, I kind of leaned away from that. I want to do this work for small businesses, for other folks, other institutions, people I know, peers. Like if nonprofits want to have access to these services, I want to figure out something and work one-on-one with them to sort of build a plan. And that allows for a lot more relationship building, which I enjoy.